What does innovation really look like in MedTech? Is it breakthrough technology that reshapes the patient care, or is it just more polished version of what we've already seen before in iteration?
The ability to be able to take your technology that you've invested so much in and is differentiated, that you think is special, articulate why you think it's special. If in the back of your mind you think it's there, then get the words onto paper, be able to do that. Bring in members in your advisory board or your board itself in order to be able to go out and work the connections they have in order to be able to get the capital.
If you've not raised money before, how do you raise large sums of capital? Because the rules in the universe is that everything takes longer than you expect and it'll cost more than you expect. That's just like the fundamental rules of the universe.
When we look at the largest companies on planet Earth, like Microsoft, Google, Apple, and everything, those companies aren't waking up and saying, oh, you know what, to grow our market cap, like we're gonna go into furniture. They're all starting to go into healthcare. Where do they sit in the future for MedTech in terms of some of these companies to raise a lot of money for really big moonshot ideas? Like we're seeing NVIDIA is essentially becoming a bank for all of AI.
You can't replace part of the brain. Like,
you treat them the same.
Source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Who exists with the products.
Robot understands things automatically.
#1 show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help a pie, a lot of things. The state of MedTech.
With your host, Omar Khateeb.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Very excited and proud to bring you this amazing keynote that I just did. So one thing we always have to think about is, what does innovation really look like in MedTech? Is it breakthrough technology that reshapes the patient care, or is it just more polished version of what we've already seen before in iteration? So today's conversation keynote is essentially built around this provocative question: are we truly disrupting the status quo or just getting better at iterating it? So in this keynote, which was done at MD&M West 2026, amazing show. It was my first time at it in Anaheim. I loved it. The team did a fantastic job there, and I can't wait to go back to 2027. So the keynote is called Disrupting the Status Quo, Are We Innovating or Just Iterating? We essentially dive headfirst into some of the most, I'd say, like uncomfortable, but very necessary conversations that are facing the MedTech industry right now, from, let's say, the tension between profitability and patient care to the ethics of pricing and access. And then, of course, we can help but get into it, funding. How do you fundraise for these kind of things? And of course, like the big elephant in the room, of course, is AI. So, you know, we try and cover all these topics all at once. And the session really doesn't aim to give any easy answer. It's actually designed to challenge assumptions, spark debate, maybe even leave you questioning whether we need to change how we think about building these companies. So to do this, I got very, very lucky and fortunate to have two amazing speakers. And so first, a show favorite, an audience favorite, the people's champ, Ray Cohen. Ray is often described as having the Midas touch, and for very good reasons. He did 3 deals in 3 years for over $5 billion. Many of you know him from his sale of Axonics to Boston Scientific for $3.7 billion. But then he had a $600 million exit for Sonovi, a $650 million of Nalu, took another company public. It's very hard to keep track of all the things that he's doing. And the best part, we're very grateful for a man like Ray, because God knows he could be just relaxing and taking it easy. But if anything, he's just working more to not only guide a lot of startups to delivering these massive results, but more importantly, impacting millions of patients around the world. And I'm very fortunate to have him to join to essentially talk about not just the fundraising aspect, but how he thinks about innovation. The other guest we have on this keynote is Tom West. So Tom brings a very rare and full spectrum perspective. He spent time at the massive engine of Johnson & Johnson to moving to the more fast-moving, high-stakes world of startups. And over various decades, he essentially lived the reality of trying to balance scale and speed. He led Intersect ENT through a successful acquisition to Medtronic for $1.1 billion, which was a huge exit. And then he served as the CEO of Nalu Medical, which Ray served as a chair on the board. And then they exited that to Boston Scientific for $650 million. And so Tom has really seen firsthand when big companies try to innovate, where they often struggle, and then also on the startup side, what it takes. And so this is a really fantastic keynote. I think there's a lot of great things about it. one thing I do want to mention that MD&M did a great job of is that we did this keynote and then we did a private Q&A session with our speakers, which was really great. And so I really encourage you to register for MD&M West 2027. They do these great events like that where they do the keynotes and these private sessions with amazing people like Ray Cohen and Tom West, where they answer questions directly. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to mention before we get into today's episode is that MD&M has other fantastic events happening throughout the country. Here is what's left for the rest of the year. We have MD&M South happening in Charlotte, North Carolina from April 22nd to 23rd. MD&M Midwest happening October 28th to 29th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And of course, for 2027, they got MD&M West, which is their big flagship happening in Anaheim. I'm going to be going back to that. I can't wait. That's happening February 9th to 11th in Anaheim, California. And then some other events later in 2027. If you want to learn more about these, so I do recommend to make it easier, just Google MD&M Informa Markets. That's going to bring up their pages. You'll be able to find whatever you want and see the events that's most interesting to you. So that being said, a big shout out to MD&M for being a fantastic partner in helping us put this content together and bring it to you, the audience. So listen, enjoy, take notes. You're definitely going to want to have to study this one. And let's get into the keynote.
10, 9, ignition sequence start.
Maybe things were just a bit simpler as a kid.
6, 5, 4, 3.
Dreaming was easier.
2, 1.
And now, maybe the problems you want to solve feel far away. What if you could dream big again and fall back in love with manufacturing? Your childhood dreams led you here. This junction, this show. What if the solutions you were looking for are right where you need them to be? And what if a conversation could lead to a breakthrough? Or a solution could be found right around the next corner? Ask yourself, what if I could dream like a kid again? This is your moment. Discover what's possible.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
Just shoot for the stars. If it feels right, and aim for my heart. If you feel like it, take me.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to MD&M West, day 2. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, I'm Annie Helfgott, Senior Event Manager with the Manufacturing Division here at Informa. I hope that video reminded you of the dreams that first inspired your journey, the dreams that led you to push boundaries, solve challenges, and create solutions that impact industries and people well beyond MedTech. This show is more than just a MedTech event. It's a celebration of innovation across advanced manufacturing. This is where ideas are shared, connections are made, and where we hope your inspirations are reignited. To kick off the day, I'm really excited. We have a fascinating and thought-provoking conversation. The topic is disrupting the status quo. Are we innovating or are we just iterating? It's a really bold question, and it challenges us to think critically about whether we're really driving innovation or just repackaging what already exists. Leading this conversation is someone who knows all about challenging the status quo. Omar is the CEO of MarketCraft, which is a marketing engineering agency that's transforming how early-stage startups succeed. He helps companies engineer belief and earn attention and craft markets that raise capital, drive adoption, and build unstoppable sales pipelines. Omar's also the host of State of MedTech, which is the #1 podcast in the world on the business, the science, and the investment of medical devices. However, his unique perspectives on innovation and disruption are not limited to MedTech. He considers the broader challenges and opportunities in advanced manufacturing as a whole. Joining Omar on this stage will be 2 exceptional thought leaders who will bring their own expertise and insights to this dynamic conversation. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Omar and his panelists to the stage for Disrupting the Status Quo. Are we innovating? Are we just iterating?
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. How's everybody doing this morning?
Wow. Yeah, kids.
Not enough coffee. How's everybody doing this morning?
Outstanding.
There we go. There we go. I'm so happy to be here. Big shout out to the team at MDM West. I don't think I have to do much intros, but I'm going to do a little bit of an intro for the two gentlemen that are joining me on stage. First is Tom West. Tom has a very interesting background in the sense that he's one of the few people who have spent a lot of time both in the largest strategics in our industry, specifically J&J, but also on the startup side. Many of you know him as he led Intersect ENT to a $1.1 billion exit to Medtronic. And then after doing that, he realized that he is a startup guy. He went back in the startup world to go and lead Nalu Medical, which is neuromodulation for chronic pain management. Led them to a $600 million exit recently to Boston Scientific, okay? And then joined with him, a good friend of mine, somebody who's been on the show many times, who's a crowd favorite. I like to call him Uncle Ray, and that's Ray Cohen. Many of you know Ray from his $3.7 billion exit to Axonics. But after that was done, he got bored, and within the next 18 months went on a spree of helping so many different companies do the same thing. With Sonovi exiting for about 500 or 600 million, Kestra going public, most recently serving as the chairman of the board at Nalu. And so I'm very honored to be joined by the gentleman on stage. Thank you so much for joining us. So
great to be here.
Thank you.
So I want to start off first by asking Tom a question. So Tom, you've worked within these large strategics before and recently had your second exit. How do you feel when it comes to, let's say, a product being acquired by a larger company? Does a product have a chance to continue being disruptive, or at that point, does it just become sort of a line item? And how do you think about that?
So there's no doubt that when a large strategic comes after a company like an Intersect or a Nalu or Axonics had greater scale, but they're clearly looking for growth. And they're looking to take an asset that has largely been de-risked in the hands of a smaller player, where elements of the commercial model, the underlying technology, clinical work have all been settled. And they're looking for growth to add to the portfolio of what they have. That's the strategic fit and the growth that they're looking for. But the risk is that they basically grow that asset and it doesn't continue to thrive in the sense of bringing on the next gen innovation and the piece after that. That's really where it's incumbent upon the new leadership or the leadership that may choose to stay with the asset to make sure that they're continuing to express the voice of the customer through the innovation and the desire to continue to bring new thinking to the asset. Because as you alluded to, the risk is otherwise it's optimized. It could be better. It could be more cost effective. Your gross margins may improve, but you're starting to lose that sparkle of how you're meeting the unmet need of the marketplace. I've seen examples of both, but it's not something that will happen naturally if somebody's not actively endeavoring to bring meaningful new innovation as that asset comes inside of the larger strategic player.
Got it. Yeah. On that note, Ray, I want to ask you something, and something I brought a prop that actually was a gift from Ray. So this is an award from Axonics that says $1 billion in sales from 2020 to 2024, which is a huge milestone. It's something that'd be celebrated in our industry, but even more importantly is 300,000 patients treated as listed on the same prize. Right. Something that we're hearing from a lot of startups these days is that a lot of them are trying to fit the criteria that VCs want to make them acquirable, right? And having sold so many different companies just in the last few years, I'm wondering, do you feel like the startup climate today is more focused on finding incremental improvements on a certain procedure or device and finding that as a way to sell versus actually solving really, really difficult moonshot problems?
So, there's a lot one could say about that, but I think it all starts from what is it that the venture capital community is after? They're after returns, right? It's as simple as that. They want to put money into something and get a return on investment, and they want that return in the shortest period of time. That's their MO. That's the way they approach these things, and that is it. So you got to start there. You got to remind yourself 5 times that that's what they're after. And so therefore you see that there's a little bit of reluctance to get started in really early stage companies. Okay, so you got 2 issues in the early stage companies. One is that sometimes they're not looking to raise enough capital. So you immediately took 95% of all the venture capital firms of the world out of the game, because if an individual fund cannot put $10 to $15 million to work in a deal, they don't want to do it. So if you're out to raise $10 million, I mean, I've seen people wanting to raise $2 million, $5 million, $10 million. It's like, who are you going to raise it from? Friends and family. It's a bad idea.
Why is that a bad idea?
It's a bad idea. It's a really bad idea.
Because we have entrepreneurs in the audience. Tell them why it's a bad idea.
You can see already we're morphing from, what VCs want and incrementalism versus new stuff. But it's about what stage of development. They want to get in. They want to be the last round in. Yep. They want to be the last round in before the IPO or the last round in before a sale is going to happen with this company. Then they can get the quickest return on their investment. So the question again was, I'm sorry.
Going back to essentially, a lot of startups.
Start the small money. Yeah,
small money, but also
friends and family. Because the fact of the matter is, it's just as difficult to raise, believe it or not, $100,000 from Tom West or somebody else than it is to raise $10 million from a venture fund. Mm-hmm. I got to service Tom. Tom is probably not that sophisticated. I'm using
easy, buddy.
Yeah.
Tom is very sophisticated.
Tom's sophisticated.
They just finished their board meeting last week, so now
he's a sophisticated, accredited investor. What the hell does that mean? Nothing. Okay. The point of the matter is, how many people are you going to service at $100,000 a piece? Mm-hmm. Not everybody can write a $100,000 check to begin with. So you're rounding up all this small dollars, and next thing you know, you got a cap table which is filled with dozens of names or hundreds of names. It's a nightmare. As the CEO of a company trying to service those individuals, these are not professional investors. They got a lot of questions. They're just going to bog you down. And it takes effort, and you have to service these people. So I think it's a really, really bad idea. Now, of course, this is the chicken and egg problem, right? Okay, if you've not raised money before, how do you raise large sums of capital? Because the rules in the universe, which Tom and I violently agree with, is that everything takes longer than you expect, and it'll cost more than you expect. That's just like the fundamental rules of the universe, right, in our business, okay? So, take a step back, figure out what are you going to do, try to find individuals keep pointing to Tom, like a Tom, been successful, ran companies, done deals, raised lots of money, transacted exits. You need Tom on your board, okay? You know what I mean? He's not going to run the business. He don't want to run the business for you, but he has contacts. He can introduce you to people. He can advocate for you. This is the key. You need to be pitching the right people. Right? The ones that are active, the ones that are investing, and so on and so on and so forth, right? And go for larger, think about a bigger sum of money, because you're going to need it anyway. So,
if I could jump in there.
Please, yeah.
When Ray came onto the board at Nalu, the greatest gift that he gave me was really the courage of conviction to go after more money. And it's not easy, to be clear, but in a constrained world of the venture capital model, where they're looking for that high multiple, they're looking for that exit, the propensity to want to put more money in is diminished, because as Ray said, they want to be the last guy in order to get the highest multiple on the way out. But as the leader of the company, what you want to be doing is finding that moment when you're accelerating into the business and where more capital allows you to start to build that virtuous circle and build momentum. And Ray came in, and with the same existing board that I had, that had been working with me, kind of gave them a little kidney punch and said, hey, these guys are hitting it. We should be investing more. Now's the time to really accelerate. And that independent board member that Ray was versus the venture capital board members that had comprised the majority of my board, it changed the conversation. And it changed it not around how to exit and get a quick return, but actually how to grow the business and put it in a place where it could thrive and either stand on its own if it needed to, or be attractive to someone else. And it was that acceleration and the courage to go after that extra round, not just a small amount of money or a kick here or there, but really believing in the business model, that it had been adequately de-risked, that now was the time to invest. And that changed the entire conversation on the Nalu board for sure. And it is that courage to think bigger and to get the people around you who can help you find that opportunity. And Ray certainly did that for Nalu, and the story is a very happy ending.
Well, I want to just add, because if you're not thinking big and acting bold, then I don't know what you're up to.
Right.
I'm with you.
Okay. I mean, you're going to play some small ball here. It doesn't make any sense. You're not going to, it's going to take forever. I mean, there's companies that are, breaking rocks in the desert for 5, 6, 7 years before they ever get to the point where they can raise a real round of funding. So you've got to have, if you're commercial and if you don't have the feet on the street, what are you doing?
Right.
Okay. 10 people, I don't care how good they are, they're only going to do so much, right? So you got to invest. And it's at different points along the curve, right? We kind of skipped to the end here a little bit, talking about commercial companies. A lot of people involved here are in development stage companies, right? All right, so you got work to do. You need capital to be able to do that work, and so on and so forth. But where does it all start? Okay, some very capable people in this audience, no question about it, brilliant people, brilliant engineers. But how do you get the capital you need to get these people to be in the game? Good people don't work for free. I'm looking at a bunch of my colleagues and they're going, "You're damn right, Ray, you're going to pay me, right?" I mean, they don't work for free. So you need the capital to get the people.
Right.
But if you don't have the capital, how do you get the people? How do you create results without the people? It's impossible. So it all gets back to, all roads lead back to capital formation. And you need to raise that money. And if you haven't done it before, I'm repeating myself now, if you haven't done it before, figure out how you can either get introduced to somebody who may, if they're outside of your network or you don't know anybody, you got to get some help. And the place to get that help is at the board table.
100%.
I'm wondering,
if you're a CEO of a MedTech company and you just got ghosted by another investor this week, or maybe a strategic that you're trying to have a meeting with just kind of brushed you off at a conference, and you're just sick and tired of all this, you want to make these people pretty much eat their words, right? I think I have something for you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most MedTech startups don't fail because of product. And trust me, I can confidently say this after interviewing so many different startups on the show, investors, strategics. A lot of them fail because the market never really formed around them. My obsession with technology adoption, and more importantly, market engineering, has sort of taken shape over the years into my business called MarketCraft, and recruiting a top tier team around me for that. And MarketCraft, we're not just about digital marketing and campaigns and everything. We focus on engineering markets. We use AI-trained models, psychology, persuasion, and strategic storytelling to manufacture something that every single CEO needs, and that's leverage. We want to give you leverage with the market, so by creating magnetic messaging and attention, we can shape a belief system that is going to attract and magnetize those early clinical adopters to you. We want to give you leverage with investors because when your category narrative is very clear and your demand signals are loud and you can show this early clinical pipeline, and then at that point, capital start to chase you instead of the other way around. Now you have options. And then leverage with strategics. Because look, when you show a strategic, and trust me, I've had many conversations with them on this podcast and offline. When you show them that you're starting to own momentum in a space that they care about, you don't just look like a startup to them anymore. Now you look more like a partner. And if you do it really well, potentially competition they need to take out, right? So if you're an early stage MedTech CEO and this all resonated with you, I want you to stop what you're doing, put pause on this podcast, go to growmymedtech.com. That's GROW, growmymedtech.com. I want you to book time with me.
Okay, we're going to do a little bit of a market analysis for you. I'm going to come to the table with 2 to 3 really good ideas. There's not a guarantee that you guys might be a fit for us. It could be the wrong time, a lot of things like that. We turn away more companies than we take on, but I can guarantee you that you're going to walk away with 2 or 3 really good ideas for free, and it's going to be a good conversation. So go to growmymedtech.com. I'm really looking forward to talking with you, and more importantly, you can feel free to vent to me about all the problems that you're having, because at MarketCraft, we want to come and solve those for you immediately. Now, let's get back to the episode.
When you look at our industry historically, we go back 10, 20, 30 years, a lot of the innovation was kind of iterative, in the sense that you find some device and some procedure, you make it a little bit better, a little faster, more efficient, whatever it might be. You're able to commercialize it a lot easier. Even 10 years ago, you didn't have vendor credentialing and things like you did today. And you just get a little bit of traction, or even just get some good clinical trials, and you're able to get acquired for 5, 10, 15 million. And that playbook seems like it's kind of run its course. The problem, though, nowadays I'm seeing is that we just don't have enough influx of capital to fund these really, really big moonshots. And I'm just wondering, how do we solve that? And Ray,
you got 2 things going on. So one is there's been a huge consolidation over the last decade or so of the strategic buyers. Huge consolidation, right? So there used to be these mid-market companies, mid-cap type companies that could buy stuff. I mean, Exonics was one of them. We went out and bought some things, okay, right? Because we had the market cap and we were funded and all those other things. But those companies are kind of gone now. They're all getting taken off the board, So you're just left with the big players. And one of the key things for them, and Nalu is a bit of an exception, is that Nalu product fit into an existing product line, and it was an adjunctive technology to what they were doing. So they wanted that. But typically, they want the company to be accretive. Let me decode that. Meaning, it's not a loss-making company, right? The strategics don't want to pick up a bunch of operating expenses. They want as Tom mentioned, they want the product, they want the gross margin, they want it to be accretive to their P&L. They don't want to plow a bunch of money in there. So they're willing to overpay for the cake that's fully baked. So what's happened is you don't see a lot of smaller deals going on, or a lot of really technology deals, unless it just happens to be a gap in their portfolio. And then they'll step up. Nalu is an example. This was a gap in the portfolio. They could see how they could make hay with that, so they stepped up, even though the company's not profitable and will continue to lose money for a period of time until you get the revenue. So that's the game. So they're really good. What are they really good at? These buyers, they're good at manufacturing.
Yep, scaling. They're good at scaling,
right? They know how to do that.
Yep.
But are they innovative? No. Can they? Are they going to make products on their own that are really cool? And I know it's getting back to the topic now. And the answer is no, absolutely not. That's not their business. They're not in the innovation business. They're in the acquiring innovative products and tucking them into their business.
And just to build on that a little bit, when you look at the J&Js, the Medtronics, the Bostons of this world, there has been a ton of consolidation in the last 5 to 10 years. So the scale of what they want to acquire now needs to be substantially greater, non-dilutive. There are clearly tuck-in opportunities within the portfolio, but those are fewer. I look at my own experience at J&J, and we rewind the tape 10 or 15 years, they were out buying the Acclarents and the Mentors, smaller players that were in new spaces, and that was part of their appetite. Now they're buying the Shockwaves and Abiomeds and much larger businesses that are commercial, de-risked, in order to be able to make sure that it contributes to what is a business of so much more scale. Now, don't be disheartened by that, but it means that, in terms of getting access to capital, there is capital out there. There's maybe not as much, and a lot of it has gone towards things like risk capital going towards AI and other opportunities. But this is where Ray's point is right on the mark, which is get a composition on your board of people who have successfully raised money in MedTech. There's no shortage of capital out there. You just got to get out, get the right introductions, make sure you have your narrative down around what your story's all about. But you're going to need to take it a step or two further today than perhaps you did did before, because you've got to again demonstrate that element of de-risking and bring it closer to the commercialization stage for it to draw the attention of a potential exit, or to give you the optionality of a public offering or another way of capitalizing the business that allows for your investors to exit.
So keeping on this theme, I want to go back early. These strategics are investing money as if they're venture capital investors.
Definitely true.
This is happening in a big way. I mean, and it's happening below the radar. They're not announcing, I'll use Boston Scientific as an example. They are in dozens of deals where they put big money down, okay? Where they've made a bet at early stage because they like the promise of the technology. And it might be in a space that they're not in. So, and not only, it's not just Boston, it's J&J's.
J&J, Stryker.
Had always been doing it, but they're back doing it. Abbott is doing it.
Yep.
You mentioned Stryker. Okay. So there's a lot of strategics that are making venture capital investments, but folks are probably not aware of the magnitude of what's going on. Now that brings the bigger discussion around, do you want a strategic on your cap table? Do you want them on your board as a board member or a board observer? How many, do you want more than one? I mean, you can get into a whole big discussion around that, but the point is they're investing a lot of money.
I'll give you the example, and Ray, you know this well. I mean, Nalu, Omar noted that we had an exit to Boston Scientific for $600 million. But actually, if you look at LinkedIn, you might see in some places it says 533. Well, what's the delta there? That's $67 million worth of equity that Boston Scientific had in Nalu prior to the outright acquisition. Right. They came in Series B. They basically led Series B, stuck with us, and we closed Series E before we actually exited in the end. And so it's a measure of their willingness to take risk in order to be able to see a technology come along. So again, in terms of the composition of your board, of the people that are advising you, those that have relationships with the strategics, in addition to knowing the venture world and having experience in the capital markets world, are important as you go on this journey. And again, we'll come full circle in the conversation, because you cannot have enough capital. You want to make sure you're raising a substantial amount. Now, it sounds cavalier and bold, but don't be satisfied because you got just a little bit, because then you're going to be chasing money all the time. How do you get a big enough nut that you can actually settle into what you want to do, which is to grow your business, whether it's on the technology side up front, whether it's starting to invest in the kind of clinical evidence that you're going to need, not only for filing, but ultimately for reimbursement and commercialization, or as, and Ray and I touched on him, where Ray was a hero for me, coming in at that commercial stage and saying, it's not 10 reps, it needs to be 75 reps. And by the way, we could use as many clinical specialists as we have representatives. I did actually hear you, Ray.
Thank you.
But
I only had to say it 5 times, but okay.
I'm slow, but not stupid. But the whole idea, again, is the courage of your conviction. I mean, it's again, it sounds lighthearted to say it here, and I know how challenging it is, but if you believe in your technology and your business, if you believe in your team, if you think you have an insight and an innovation that is different, the best way to express that is to have the courage to go out and make sure you adequately capitalize as quickly as you can in order to be able to run up the score. One last comment, and I promise I'll get off my soapbox at least for a moment. Because another thing that's true is, time isn't necessarily your friend. Things can go wrong. A pandemic. There I was, first-time public company CEO at Intersect, and the pandemic hit. I'm not wishing upon us another pandemic, but boy, oh boy, didn't see that coming. And in having enough capital to weather a storm of that nature, or perhaps there's going to be a change in the reimbursement outlook, and suddenly you're in a longer timeline than you thought. Again, do you have enough capital to be able to weather a storm? And because time's not your friend, and you want to make sure that you can manage your way through it. Or maybe it's a developmental setback in terms of your technology. Whatever it may be, again, you want to have the wherewithal that you're not suddenly desperately running in another direction, but rather you're seeing it through.
So Omar, I want to frame back to the bigger question: iteration versus, iterating. Okay. There's a lot of companies that, I don't know what's in the water, but why do you want to be the fourth man in a three-man race? Like, what's up with that?
Can I?
Okay. No, bear with me. I'll say it out.
Go ahead.
But like, what are you doing? I mean, there's already players in the market, or there's all these people chasing this thing. Like, that's the thing, right? And it's just an iteration. You're just saying, okay, I'll use an example: obstructive sleep apnea. Okay. There was a monopolist, Spiro Medical, did a fantastic job, created the market, went out there, got reimbursement, everything. Doing great. Patients are getting benefit from the technology and so forth. Okay. All right. It's a big opportunity. It's a monopoly. Okay. That's going to attract people. And I'm fully supportive of that. If there's a monopoly, you want to be second or third in that race, okay, that's worth going after. But what's with the 17 other companies now that all want to get in this damn thing, right? I mean, you're trying to make an argument to differentiate what you're fixing to do or what you're working on versus stuff that's out there, right? So there's a lot of that, and VCs seem to kind of be attracted to that thing, but keeping in mind that they're attracted for the wrong reasons, in my view. I mean, you're creating a new co to compete with somebody who's already got, a couple hundred people in the field selling $1 billion worth of product, okay? You better be coming up fast, okay? And if you're way behind or years later, I'm not so sure that's investable. And it's the worst of the venture capital angels, if you may, that wind up plowing some money into deals like that. I mean, the world does not need 7 OSA companies. We just don't need it. Okay, and pain was a good example, right? Could you imagine? I want to be in the spinal cord stimulation business, big prize, $3 billion market, but who's in there? Abbott, Boston, Medtronic. Okay, I mean, okay, Saluda. Help me.
Yeah.
Others.
I think Globus now.
Globus now bought Nevro, right? So you got 5 major companies in that game. Okay, you want to do something in pain? Do something creative like peripheral nerve stimulation, ankles, knees, shoulders, elbows, whatever, right? That's a different, now you've got something that's at least going after an area they can't treat. Is it in the same domain? Sure. So you see what I'm saying? You got to think about, where if there's an existing market, what can you do that is adjacent that could get people's attention ultimately?
But how do we get to that point? Because I feel like what essentially happened, if you want to go beyond just like MedTech, 2020 to 2021. A lot of money was plowed into venture capital deals, like not just in healthcare, across the board, and exits were bad. So like VC as an asset class underperformed over the last few years, and so now a lot of venture capital funds are trying to play private equity, or they'll tell me, "Oh, Omar, we love this company, but come talk to us when they're generating revenue." Right? And it's all because they have LPs that are being pressure on them. And so as a result, I talked to 2 different founders actually last week, and I'm going to try not to out them. That essentially they have a really amazing technology pathway, both of which are using very meaningful. One is has a application of AI, the other one has a physical AI application. And their thing is but we're having trouble raising money for that stuff. So we're raising money for this earlier stuff that goes after this market that already exists, and it's more iterative versus a disruptive thing. And so is that the pathway now that I think most MedTech companies are going to have to take, which is we have something that's iterative, that has a place in the market, has a reimbursement code, and then when we raise money, we can do more disruptive things? Or how do we break loose of that?
I guess my answer to that would be, and this again, it sounds kind of trite. As the leader of the company that seeks to be in a breakthrough space, you got to work really hard on your narrative. What is your story? And it can't just be that this is a cool technology. You have to think it all the way through to what the end game looks like. So yes, you've got a cool disruptive technology that has some capability that's differentiated, but then you also need to be able to talk about how it can meet an unmet need in the marketplace that is worthy of investment, that you understand the pathway to get clinical evidence that would be necessary in order to be able to get the coding that would allow you to be able to get appropriate reimbursement that has a TAM and a market opportunity of a certain scale. If you can't talk the whole narrative all the way through, you're not going to draw a lot of attention at all. And it really is, you can't just be a technology-driven company. Ultimately, you have to say the storyline, the narrative from start to finish, and you may not have executed it yet, but it has to be compelling to see that there is value creation of a meaningful magnitude, or otherwise they're going to look at your technology and how it fits into a playbook that they already know. And if you want to step out and be even more impactful as an innovator and on the lives of patients and to create greater dollar value over time, then you have to start thinking about that narrative at the outset and not just get enamored with your technology.
So on that note, if you engineer that market and craft that message and you play it all the way through, so at some point, if you have a very disruptive technology, you have to think about how the hell are we going to scale this? So how early should like an entrepreneur come to, let's say, an MD&M and start talking to manufacturers and say, okay, like when we get a certain level of revenue, when we raise this much money, this is who we go to start scaling that product when it comes to like manufacturing it?
So I think you go even before you've gotten to heavy revenue. You better be able to understand.
Before heavy revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
You need to be able to understand that you can take the technology concept that you have and that you can manufacture it. And you can manufacture it in a manner that's going to have low enough cost of goods that you're going to have a gross margin that's going to be able to generate cash that'll allow you to reinvest, and that gives a pathway and a clear visibility to your investors that there is a pathway towards profitability and ultimate exit. And that means from the beginning, design for manufacturing, design for quality has to start at the outset, or otherwise you're in trouble.
How do you, Ray, and I'm wondering, how do you do that as a startup with a manufacturer when you don't have the money and you're trying to convince like a large manufacturer to say, hey, like we kind of want to work with you on potentially figuring out how do we scale this product when we get to that point. We don't have the money to do that right now. And I'll be honest, this is an area, I'm a marketing and sales guy, so this is an area that I don't know a lot about.
Look, you're manufacturing, you got to manufacture product to do your clinical work. Okay, so you're going to start small. You're going to either you're going to do it in house with your engineers, or you're going to go to somebody down the street and have them make some product for you. But that's all small ball stuff. And this issue of ramping manufacturing is still a down the road kind of a thing. As long as you can speak to it, which is what Tom was saying, you can speak to it. But we see. I see a lot of decks these days. A lot of people pitching decks, and everyone's got this hockey stick revenue projection.
I saw that one too.
It's like, guys, get rid of that one, would you, please? It's like nobody believes that shit. Okay, just put what is the TAM? What is the total addressable market? What is prevalence? What is incidence? What is the serviceable market? That's the slide you need.
Yep.
Okay. If you're early, you don't need to be spending a lot of time talking about commercialization because you're not there. You haven't earned the right to talk about that, okay? And you mentioned we're back to this disruptive stuff. Let me give you an example, all right? And there's money available, all right? I'm going to use Spiro Medical. We're in Orange County. It was just in the Orange County Business Journal, okay? Everybody, if you get it. By the way, if you don't get the Orange County Business Journal, you should subscribe to it, okay? Because things that are happening here where we live is relevant. So this is a Series A new co. We sold 85% of the equity on day one. We raised $67 million in a Series A, but we sold 85% of the equity because 15 or 18%, right? VCs like 12 to 15% option pools. Entrepreneurs like 15 to 18% option pools. But the point is, sell the damn equity. What are you holding on to this equity for? You need the cash, man. You need the money. So don't screw around, right? Now, we were able to do that, and quite an interesting syndicate: Europe, United States, China, and India. Okay, so the money's out there, man, you know, but this was a new neurostimulation for asthma. Nobody ever thought of this before. It's a brand new.
I looked at that and I thought it was fascinating. I talked to Rinda actually last week, and I was fascinated because I asked him, like, oh, how much did you guys raise for your Series A? And I'm used to hearing people saying 10, 20, 67. So it's a large Series A from.
No, it's great. It's an enormous amount of money. But the point is, but now the team. So what happens? Raise the capital, add water, and voila, here's the team. We got the whole team now. There's like 15 people working on this product nonstop right now, because there's nobody wasting time, money, pitching stories, making decks and shit. It's like, go to work, come to MD&M, find the vendors you want to work with to fill that little, that little widget, right? That's why they're here. So the point is that people say that, it's so hard to raise money, there's no money available. It's BS, okay? The money is there, but you got to have something to get their attention. Right? Neurostimulation, everybody understands that time has come. Time came 10 years ago, and now it's big time, right? What are we not treating with neurostimulation? Well, asthma wasn't one of them. Well, this looks really, really promising. People want to jump in that boat. Another example, the BioBeat. I see they're attributing BioBeat to my name now. Okay, cool. All right, so we just raised in a Series B. This is Israeli technology, great tech. A Series B, $40 million pre. The other one was 15 pre, by the way. And we raised $50 million from 3 world-class investors and a mini strategic, one of the few left. A mini strategic.
I appreciate you using that word too.
Yeah, a mini strategic, So the point is, but what's up? It is a completely innovative technology. It's a patch-worn, cuffless, ambulatory blood pressure monitor. FDA cleared. But no footprint for sales and marketing in the United States. CEO moved his family from Israel. Okay, he's here. But okay, now you got to figure out, how am I going to make this thing work? How am I going to generate the revenue, right? That was a commercial product. So you see what I'm saying? So that's a good example of something that is highly innovative, very disruptive, right? Because ambulatory blood pressure monitoring is one of the least used really cool technologies that exist, because no one wants to have the damn cuff inflating all day long and all night long, and you can't sleep. It makes no sense. So the technology embodiment sucks. And it's been that way for decades. So you always got to kind of be looking, if there's something that exists and that you can have a significant improvement in what that technology is, you can attract the capital and the people to work on those projects. So you got to really be thoughtful about these things. So, I'm very fortunate, right? That I mean, I've been around a long time. Okay, you get to see a bunch of things, and in December of 2025, 2 companies with me as chairman, we raised $117 million between the 2 companies in a Series A and a Series B. So it's there. The money is there. The ideas are there, the quality of the people. We have a phenomenal infrastructure of exceptional technologists and engineers, particularly in Southern California. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Tom's biased towards, what's that little town there?
San Diego.
No, Carlsbad. He's kind of biased there. I'm biased towards Irvine. Okay, but the point is that there's not much difference here. I mean, we're in a really great space. We got the talent. Now there are no VCs in Orange County, by the way, in MedTech. I mean, if I'm insulting somebody, sorry. Hardly in San Diego, biotech down in San Diego. So, but that doesn't mean anything. Who cares? If the VCs are not here in Southern California, fine, just go. It doesn't matter where they are. People want to, what are they betting on? Good tech, good people management, who's involved, the people, it's very important. And then, as Tom mentioned earlier, what is the exit scenario? Who's going to buy this damn thing? Is this an IPO candidate, or is this a candidate for an acquisition? You need to have a good sense about these things before you even get started. And if you can't answer the question, where does this fit with a strategic buy or a mini strategic, you're going to have a bit of an issue. They want to hear that. that you're thoughtful about it. You know, it's not just, oh, I created a page and I put a bunch of big company names on it, like, you know.
If you look at the way Ray just described BioBeat and Spiros, he started with the technology and talked about how the technology itself is different. Then he talked about its application in addressing an unmet need of the marketplace where there hasn't been satisfaction. Then he talked about what might be possible if we could do this. That's what I mean by the narrative.
Yep.
And the ability to be able to take your technology that you've invested so much in and is differentiated, that you think is special, articulate why you think it's special. If in the back of your mind you think it's there, then get the words onto paper, be able to do that. Bring in members in your advisory board or your board itself in order to be able to go out and work the connections they have in order to be able to get the capital. But it is around that story. I can't emphasize it enough, and it sounds so simple, but the tendency to want to just get a little bit of money in to do the next gap in order to hit the next milestone in the technology pathway is insufficient. You want to get the bigger story in, get the bigger money in to allow yourself the breathing room, the $67 million that allows the management team now to be able to think about bringing their baby to life rather than going out with a placard on asking for money on the corner of every store. I mean, it sounds silly, but that fundamentally is the key to nurturing these babies up.
You know, reimbursement. We live in a world where if there's no reimbursement, you're screwed.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So, but sometimes, look, if you have taken the journey all the way and now you got a commercial product, well, you better have reimbursement. I mean, Nalu had half reimbursement.
Yep.
Okay. The Medicare paid, but privates weren't paying. It took years and multiple clinical studies to provide the evidence to get the privates to step in. So that was a journey, but it was okay. They were able to do business, transact business, at least with Medicare patients. Okay. Now, if you got a product that's designed for 30-year-olds, you got a problem.
That's a problem.
Okay. So, but the reimbursement topic can be something for down the road. Okay. Yeah. What is the reimbursement code for neurostimulation for treatment of asthma? And the answer is there ain't one.
Yeah, I looked it up.
There ain't one. But it's okay because it's a down the road issue. In other words, people plowed the money in now because it's a development stage project. Okay. We don't have to worry about reimbursement today. Okay, but if you've got a product that you've spent this money on and you did some little clinical work or whatever, and you know, and now you've got an approval of sorts, whether it's CE mark or FDA or whatever, and there's no reimbursement code, you're dead in the water, man. I mean, you should have figured that shit out earlier, or at least have a pathway. No, people will bet if you can show the pathway. Here's what we would need to do to establish this code, or here how I can leverage this existing code, and here's why it's kosher. You know, on and on and on. You better do that work, man. You got to do that work up front, right? And otherwise you're going to show up with your deck and you're going to be pitching shit, and you're going to get questions that you can't answer. So I'm trying to, the audience here. I mean, mainly a lot of technical people and entrepreneurs in the audience. We're trying to kind of gear conversation towards what the life that they're living today, right? But you gotta do the work. Okay, well, I don't have the money to hire the right reimbursement consultant. Well, you're screwed then. Let's go back to point A.
Right.
Okay. The money. Okay. So you have to spend some money up front. You got to have some market research. Just because you went on the internet and you can say what the prevalence of a condition is, that's not good enough. Right? You gotta have third-party facts, whether it's marketing research, reimbursement research. That's the money you want to spend early on. Okay, before you start hiring a bunch of people and airing out whatever few dollars you have on building the tech. It has to start with the ideas, right? And you need this information because it gives me confidence, right? If I just turned into a VC, right? If I'm writing a check, it's a confidence game. You need to give me your confidence, but how do you get the confidence if you didn't do the work? And you show up with some cockamamie story, man. It's like next, you know, I don't know if people understand this, but generally speaking, the average venture firm will look at 200 to 300 deals in a year and they'll invest in maybe 5. That's your odds to start with. And then there is no opportunity to make a good first impression after you screwed up you know what I mean? You can't, you know, the milk is spilled on the ground already. You screwed it up. You know, try to get that second meeting.
Do you think, you know, listening to both of you, what I'm hearing is, again, the importance of the story, but more importantly, you know, for disruption to happen, you need a very large addressable market, a large serviceable market, and to raise a lot of money at the beginning, which I agree with, because I think it's, you know, I feel, and I think that there's this remnants of how our industry functioned the last 20 years. And it no longer functions that way, which is, hey, go raise a little bit of money, $2, $3, $4 million. You know, you get to this milestone, go raise a little bit more. And it's just not that way anymore. Do you think that the right way to do this is that you look for really, really big problems to solve, right, in adjacent markets, right, that nobody else is doing or it just hasn't been done well, and raising a lot of money? And if you do that, then the right amount of support, whether it's regulatory, manufacturing, everything, kind of will build around it. Because like, oh, this one company raised $50 million or $100 million, you know, Series A or Series B, and then that will attract the people to sort of support and make sure that product makes its way through.
I think that's true. The one piece that's missing from your equation is management discipline. So now you have this big chunk of money. You know, you don't want to be running around spending money willy-nilly on science projects and otherwise. And this is where you really need to make sure you've got the right management team, the right guidance from your board, and that you're being disciplined about how you spool that money out. You know, in your model of the way it used to be, in some respects, when we were talking about MedTech, the way it used to be is that you could look at a 510K approach, or you could look at even a PMA approach, and it was relatively, you know, inexpensive to be able to get to market. I think that's a false notion, because, you know, to Ray's point exactly, if you get all the way to market and yet you don't have reimbursement and you haven't been thinking that through, then all of a sudden you're dead in the water. So how do you know, kind of raise the money, demonstrate the discipline, think about the totality of the value proposition, spool it out appropriately over time in order to be able to create the value and the lift that you want? I mean, one of the ironies of I think, you know, MedTech is, hey, it's easier to get approvals in MedTech than it is in pharma. And that's true. But the fallacy in that is, the benefit that pharma has, by the time you've done your phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials, you have all your data that you need. If you've just gone a little bit on the cheap towards your 510K MedTech approval, you may get there. But by definition, you're now in a category where, you know, there are substantial equivalent precedents, because that's how you got your 510K, and you don't have your clinical data. So you're really kind of a me too in the midst of a no man's land. But, you know, because you saved money up front and you didn't put that money down. So again, you know, coming back to this, how do you manage your way through it? It's with belief in the management team you have, surrounding yourself with the talent that you need, whether you own it, you rent the market access professional who can help you with coding and reimbursement, but you have to have the discipline to have that holistic picture of what this is going to be. You don't have to hire it all at once. You don't have to do it all at once. But again, I'll come back to my broken record. You need to speak to the totality of the story in order to be able to draw people's attention and to get them to buy into you and to believe that this has the possibility to be bigger. And you have to always be thinking big. And that only then will you unlock significant value.
And it sounds like, you know, one of the things that you keep going back to, which I agree with, is that aside from having a really, really big vision, you have to sort of play out the entire story all the way to the end. Yep. And I think also the other side of it is to also sit down and say, okay, if we were to get acquired, who would acquire us and why? And really map that out.
Yep. And you know, and then always the optionality of, and If we were to no longer continue to raise money from VCs and we wanted to think about a public offering, what's the story that you would tell Wall Street? Why is it that they would believe in you as an asset that is differentiated from others? Because you don't want to be just dependent on, hey, they're the four players or the strategics who might buy us out. You always have to have a countervailing point. Again, where Ray was super helpful to me is, the journey that we walked through in the summer of 2025 was plan A was a public offering for Nalu. And only when we went to the major Congress of Aspen, the American Society of Pain and Neurology, and suddenly the tables turned, and instead of Tommy West running around trying to chase down all the strategics, they were coming to me. We went back to the board and said, you know what? We should look at a dual track approach, IPO and courting strategics. And now we had a tension point because we had an alternative. And that's what created the opportunity for us to be able to.
And you need to be thinking about these things. You need to be knowledgeable. You need to know what's going on in this universe. Okay, we'll use BioBeat as another example since Tom's talking about IPOs. Okay, is there a strategic buyer strategic buyer for this device that I described? That's not really what the big players do. They're kind of in the procedure business. Okay, so I don't really see them, acquiring a diagnostic instrument like that. Even though it could be hundreds of millions in revenue, I just thought it's not a fit. It's not a good fit for them. Now, did I test this theory? Damn right I did. Okay, because it costs nothing to have a conversation. Okay. Hey, what do you think about this? Yeah, it's really interesting. Good luck with that. Great, but it doesn't really, okay, great. Next. Okay, so what did I pitch? I'm going to do an IPO. Why? Because there's a company called, oh my God, I'm blanking, iRhythm. Yep. What does iRhythm have? They have a patch-worn ambulatory ECG system that basically put all Holter monitoring in the grave, dead. Nobody does that shit anymore with the multiple electrodes. It's just one patch, done. Okay, that's a $900 million annualized revenue line for that company. They have some ankle biter competitors, but the point is they're the big player. They have a $5.5 billion market cap. How did they get the market cap? Well, because institutional investors, the fund managers in America primarily, they like the story. The company's doing well. They're buying the stock. They raise the value of the damn company. Okay, so what am I doing? I'm saying, yeah, we're going to take this company public because all institutional investors in America own this iRhythm stock. They know the story. I show up in a meeting. It's like, oh, hey, you remember iRhythm? Well, guess what? We're the iRhythm for ambulatory blood pressure monitoring.
Right.
Okay. And when I say that, they go, oh, yeah, oh, I see that. And then they immediately go to the next thing. Oh, they might acquire you before you go public? Well, who the hell knows? But the point is, that's our plan. So I was pitching I'm pitching a future IPO, okay, as opposed to a trade sale, purely based on the fact that I understand what iRhythm is doing and I understand the good listening that company has in the public market. Okay, so same thing. Would we have been successful taking Nalu public? No question about it. Because institutional investors have made bets in the neuromod space. They've made bets in the pain space. The big players that they own the stock of are all in that business. So you gotta kind of know what's going on out and about in the world, what the public companies are doing, what products they have, what they're working on, things of that nature. So it's not just, you can't just be so insular that I'm focused on my tech and engineering these little widget things and all. You know what I mean? Somebody in that organization has to be looking out over the horizon and understanding these things because they help form your story, okay? And in the end, we keep coming back, right, to you can't innovate or iterate unless you got the money. Where the hell are you going to get the money from, okay? I mean, unless you're Donald Trump Jr., okay. Sorry, I couldn't.
Sorry, Ray.
You know what I mean? There's some dudes with silver spoons in their mouth, right? That's not us, by the way. That's not us. You know, the people I know that have been successful in our business, man, they broke rocks in the desert, man. They worked their ass off. This is not an easy game. This is a hard game, and you need to be 1,000% committed. Otherwise, don't play this game.
On that topic of bringing in new money, you know, I was talking to Tom earlier that something that we try and solve through the podcast, and I'm very grateful, one for Ray for the many times you came on, and Tom's going to be coming on as well. So you have two existential crises in this industry. Number one is talent. Smartest people in, you know, coming out of college and everything, they're not going into MedTech. I go down the street, I always ask people, I'm like, do you know what MedTech is or med device? They're like, oh, like hospital beds and stuff. No offense to people with hospital beds, by the way, it's, you know. And the other side is capital, right? And so when we look at the largest companies on planet Earth, like Microsoft, Google, Apple, and everything, those companies aren't waking up and saying, oh, you know what, to grow our market cap, like we're gonna go into furniture. They're all starting to go into healthcare. Where do they sit in the future for MedTech in terms of some of these companies to raise a lot of money for really big moonshot ideas? Like we're seeing, for example, NVIDIA is essentially becoming a bank for all of AI. Do you feel like there's some place for these, you know, existing companies to kind of come into MedTech and start funding some of these projects, and that's a new pool of capital? Ray, you're shaking your head no? Or?
I would say no. They're after consumer toys. That's what they're playing around with, right? Oh, my Apple Watch can measure my SpO2. Well, okay, if you got a bad number, what are you going to do about it? Well, you're going to go see a doctor and get a proper analysis done, or EKG, or it's just, they're in the toy phase. They're in information for consumers, which is a great trend. God bless everyone, okay? But you're not making any real diagnosis. You're not treating anyone based on this stuff that they're doing. So that's where they are right now. I think they're probably going to stay as far away from the device or let's say life science business because of regulation. Regulation, the FDA, the quality systems, all that shit that they don't have. They don't need, you know, ISO 13880. What's the number? 1384, 85? What the hell is it? You know, they don't need that shit, right? They don't need it. And they don't care, and it's very dangerous for them. Could you imagine, you know, Google or Apple's going to start like make a real serious device, and then next thing you know, they got a warning letter from the FDA. I mean, you know, so that now everything I'm saying is circa 2026. I can't tell you what the hell's going to happen in 36. Okay, I don't know which direction they're going to go, but it seems to me, if I'm betting in Vegas, I'm betting on the fact they're not coming into this business.
So they're off, and then I have another group, and Tom, I want to hear from you as well. Is pharma? I feel that pharma
cannot do devices.
They can't do devices, but is there an opportunity for them to start looking into devices for drug delivery, something? They want to own that patient journey completely outright?
20 years ago, Tom, they remember?
Well, but I'll give you what happened 20 years ago.
But I think it happens to some degree today. I mean, you look at Nalu, and our Series E was led by Novo Holdings. That's a pharma company that is investing in the device space, not because it's necessarily an adjacency to what they do as the largest insulin provider in the world, but because they have excess capital from the strength of the GLP-1s. They're putting that and deploying that.
Chasing returns.
And they're chasing returns, but they're fueling innovation in a space they understand, right, which is the regulated space of healthcare. And you're starting to see the likes of the Boston Scientifics and the J&Js and their venture arms starting to percolate again a little bit back into the business. So I think there are other sources of strategic capital that are out there that aren't necessarily pure plays of we want to swoop you up and bring you into our fold, and that represents opportunity. Again, there's no shortage of capital. It's finding its way more towards tech right now, and we need to kind of bring that back. But that's ultimately incumbent upon us to tell the story again and tell how this is differentiated, and I'll add another word to the innovating and iterating, how it's disruptive, how that it is a chance to shake up the status quo within the MedTech space. There was a Harvard Business School professor, Clay Christensen, who did all sorts of work on the innovator's dilemma and the need for disruption in innovation. Think of about your technology and its ability to potentially disrupt a status quo business that's out there, because that will garner people's attention in a heartbeat, and that will garner capital. To come in and just be a Me Too player isn't going to get people's attention. You know, I'll pat myself on the back a little bit. The single most important decision I made as the president and CEO of Nalu was to go after peripheral nerve stimulation instead of spinal cord stimulation.
And the best decision I made at Exonics was to not go after pain or spinal cord stimulation, but to go after urinary urge incontinence, a completely different area. So
one was a brand new, total new green field. Mine was a little bit more disruptive, off the beaten path, but both were much better plays than going in. And I used to use the analogy all the time. How are we going to break through the front door if it's guarded by 4 800-pound gorillas? And what we're going to do is we're going to go in the side door. We're going to sit at the kitchen table. We're going to talk around peripheral nerve stim. And by the time the 4 800-pound gorillas realize that I'm in the room, I'm already working and expanding the practice of this group. Think about disruption as a really critical element, that you're going to change it, or that you're going to take an application to Ray's analogy of iRhythm. We're going to take an analogy and we're going to do something a little bit different, but where they can relate, and all of a sudden that's going to garner the attention and the interest of others.
So, Omar, you know, this is such a, I mean, from my perspective, such an interesting conversation, right? But you notice the challenge. We're all over the board, right? And it's very hard to be here and generalizing, you know, dispensing, you know, this great advice, but in a general way, because the devil is always in the details.
Amen.
You know, it's always in the details, like specifically, what is it exactly? And what, you know, so, you know, I just wanted to say that it's challenging, right? Because we could sit and literally, we could have this conversation for the next 3 or 4 hours, okay? And cover a whole wide range of additional things.
So, but that's an important lesson, and it's, again, it sounds cliche, but you got to, as the leader of an entrepreneurial venture, you have to own every aspect of the business. You know, when Ray and I sit down and we start talking trash about the respective businesses that we're in, it's remarkable the depth of knowledge and understanding that Ray has around the technology, around the marketplace, around the patient need. You have to own the totality of it. And only then will the narrative kind of emerge for you that you can be compelling and talking to others. But you
got to be a subject matter expert.
100%. And you got to live it and breathe it. As Omar alluded to, I spent 23 years at Johnson & Johnson. When you're in a big company like that, you can be a single subject matter expert, but you're not asked to own the totality of the business. When you're the CEO or you're the entrepreneur and the innovator, you need to own the totality of it. You need to understand every bit of it. And to the extent that you don't, then you surround yourself with people who do, and you learn it with them and from them, and you build your team in that manner. You don't surround yourself in the team with people who think exactly like you. You surround yourself with experts who know more and that can complement you, so that your team is fulsome and understanding the totality of the opportunity.
You will read this time and time and time again, because the key is, if you're a generalist, we're generalists. We can't engineer the damn product. Okay, we need the people. I use a silly example. You got to create a beautiful little pizza pie, right? And all the slices have to be pointy people, because they're expert at this thing and that thing and that thing. Okay, and yeah, you might be the ringleader in the, you know, flipping the pie, but the point is in the silly analogy. But you need to bring that talent, and if you hear any successful people talking, that's what they go to. I surround myself with people who are expertise, who are smarter than myself, blah, 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 blah. And I try to bring this great team together. Now, the team ain't coming together unless you can pay them.
Right.
Okay? I mean, you can't work for coupons, stock options, because you can't eat them. Okay? You can't eat stock options. Okay? So people need to get, they need to run their lives. They need to get some cash, right, to run their lives. Now, we all are anybody who's been in the game for a while, we understand the value of equity. You want to have equity. But the point is, you can't eat it. The people that are working for you can't eat it. Yeah, if you're the leader, and okay, maybe you can make sacrifices. But the point is, here we are, 20 seconds left. What does it all come back down to? The money. So.
But I think you're right. And again, it was a nun, one of the nuns, the sisters of Mayo Clinic, that said, like, very simply, like, look, no money, no mission. So.
Well, God bless you then.
There you go.
On that note, thank you, Tom, and
Omar,
thank you, Ray. And more importantly, I want to point something out. Neither of these guys need to be working anymore at all. Tom, exited from Intersect. Ray did Axonics. They could be just hanging out, taking it easy, but they're back in the game in many ways, doing things like this. They don't need to be spending time with us today. And so I just want to thank you so much for doing that, because at the end of the day, aside from the advice and knowledge, the capital you bring, these amazing companies, is the hundreds of thousands and even millions of patients that get essentially impacted.
That's the key.
That's the key.
Right? In the end, that's the karmic benefit of all this. We are helping create better quality of lives for our fellow citizens and others around the world, right?
Amen.
So that's what drives us in the end, right? Meaningful work that really helps people. That's a mitzvah. You know what I mean? That's a damn good thing if you can do that. And I applaud everybody here. And that's why we're here spending our time, because we love this business. We're doing good work.
It's a hard business, but
it's hard, but it's hard work. It has real cosmic benefits associated with it. I mean, man, the people I have met over the years, people we brought back from the dead with a defibrillator, okay? Wow. Or people have better quality of life, or something as simple as, I can get to the bathroom in time now. I don't leak, okay? It seems like a trivial thing unless you're damn leaking on the way to the bathroom. Okay?
Well, unless you don't go out of your home anymore
because you're
afraid of embarrassment or whatever.
Things like that.
You're an enabler.
Yeah. So this is the good thing. So I'm glad that you finished with that, because in the end, that's what matters. It really matters. We get hung up on the money, all that, but in the end, we're helping people. We're doing God's work. So,
right, Tom.
I wish you all good fortune.
Yes, good luck to everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. That's really good.
Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.